Kadosh, Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. If you remember, we were speaking about the last halacha. We were talking about the halachot of Kiddush. And we mentioned that what happens right now in a scenario where you do not have the wine for Kiddush. So we made a differentiation between Kiddush on Friday night, Kiddush on Shachrit in the morning, right? And then we also made on Havdalah. Now we're going to speak about a very interesting case, which is going to be what happens now if a person does not have wine or bread, but it could be that they will bring him wine or bread a little bit later on. So we'll go through the scenarios. For example, let's say it's Shabbat morning. So right now he does not have wine and he does not have bread. So if you remember on Shabbat morning, we said that if a person does not have wine, so therefore they should do it on Chamar Medina. And if he doesn't have it on Chamar Medina, he would even do it on another liquid, not Chamar Medina, but he will not do it on the bread. And the reason why is, if you remember, we mentioned because on Shabbat morning it's only B'rei Priya Geffen. There's no other recognition that this is Kiddush, because if you're not going to use, since in the morning all the psukim beforehand is not an obligation. If I come on Shabbat morning and I start straight, Savri Mananan, right, and I start Baruch Hashem B'rei Priya Geffen, there's no problem. I was Yitzhak Chova Kiddush, all the extra psukim that we add in beforehand, whether it's V'Shamaru B'nei Yisrael Shabbat, or from Tashim Mishpat Reglecha, some people will even add on Mizmor LeDavid, whichever one that you add on, but it's not an obligation. And therefore, on Shabbat morning, if you do not have wine, use Chamar Medina. Chamar Medina could be beer or any liquid, any beverage which is commonly used in the community, which is going to be a very important, a very chashuv type of a liquid, of which we call it Chamar Medina. If you do not have Chamar Medina, you do it on She'akol. You will do it on something else. Here he says, what happens right now if Shabbat Shachrit, the person does not have wine or he does not have bread? So even if it is going to be that they're going to bring him wine or bread later on, he says if it's going to be that he has to wait a very long extended period for them to bring it, he's allowed to come and to eat foods even without Kiddush in order to be Mekayem the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbat. And then later on when they bring him the wine or the bread, so then he's going to make a bracha on them, and he has kavanah to be Mekayem the mitzvah of Kiddush Rabbah, which is the Kiddush of Shabbat morning. So that's going to be a very interesting case where a person will not have neither the wine or the bread. Obviously, he's not going to have, as we mentioned before, also the beer, right? So because if not, then he could have just done the Kiddush on the beer. But he didn't have that as well. And then what happens is that all of a sudden now, right, he comes and he says, afterwards he's going to make a bracha and he's going to do Kiddush Rabbah. Now this is going to be only on Shabbat Shachrit. Says Halacha Brura, what happens now on Friday night? So he says on Friday night it's a little bit different. If you remember the Kiddush on Friday night, we're actually adding in Mekadesh Shabbat, and it's actually Doraita. Now there is going to be one difference in the Friday night. If you already said Mekadesh Shabbat in the Amidah, which means in the Tefillah you already said, right, the Beracha of Mekadesh Shabbat, and there you thought, which means you had in mind to be Yotzei Chovah, the mitzvah of Kiddush. So here he says, if this happened on Friday night, and right now you're not looking for that you're going to have bread or wine, right, throughout the entire night. So even if they're going to bring it during the day, do not stay in a Ta'anit, but rather you're going to eat other foods without Kiddush, and you're going to be Mekayem the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbat, and you're going to have the mitzvah of Kiddush in the Beracha of the Tefillah, which means in your Amidah, you have in mind when you say Mekadesh Shabbat, and that's it. Now he says, however though, if they're going to bring you wine or bread, right, and for sure they're going to bring it to you, so here, the difference here is that even if you have to wait a long time, you would have to wait until Chatzot Laila, which means that here in Miami, let's say right now it's around, let's say 1:19, so therefore you would have to wait until 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever time in Chatzot, in order you would have to wait until that time. After that time, right, you do not need to wait. Or he does bring down here that this is also the psak of the Mishnah Brura, that if a person's chalash, which means a person is very weak, and therefore he cannot wait until Chatzot, so therefore what they're allowed to do is they're allowed to do it immediately, right, without any problems. And then afterwards, when they do bring him the wine, he should do Kiddush on the wine and he should eat again, whether it's going to be a kazait of Pataba Bekisnin, a kazait of Mizonot, or if he has bread and they brought him the wine with the bread, so then obviously he would also try to eat a kazait or a kabetza right, better said, of the mitzvah of Sudat Shabbat properly. Now this is only if they brought it 100%, which means that he knows for sure, for a fact, that they're going to come and they're going to bring him the bread or the wine. What happens if he's got a doubt? He's not sure. Somebody said, you know what, maybe I'll come, I'll bring you some wine, I'll bring you something, but he's not really sure. So here he says, and this is how he finishes off Siman Reshpetet, he says if a person, though, is in a doubt whether they're going to bring it to him or not, right? He says in such a scenario, he does not need to wait whatsoever, whether it's going to be the nighttime or going to be the daytime, and therefore he's allowed to continue, right, with all the other foods, right, and he does not need to wait for the Kiddush. So again, one more time, obviously if a person has the wine is the Kiddush. If it's not the wine, it's going to be the bread. That will be in the nighttime. But here, if he does not have neither the wine nor the bread, and now all of a sudden he wants to eat something at least, he needs to eat something, but he doesn't have anything else. He was stuck, I don't know where. Now he's got fruits or vegetables, or he's got other things, but he doesn't have neither the wine or the bread. So again, if he knows that maybe somebody, that's for sure, somebody's going to bring him the wine or the bread, so then he would have to wait until Chatzot. If not, so then immediately he starts eating, and he has to have that in mind during the tefillah about Mekadesh Shabbat.